Hi, and welcome to another episode of About the Authors TV. I'm your host, Jake Brown. Ever been to 7030 Hollywood Boulevard? That's where TV comedy legend George Schlatter's star can be found. To sit with George Schlatter and hear his stories is a gift. Legendary Billy Crystal is raved of the iconic Hollywood TV producer, who the History Channel has correctly identified as the mastermind of the groundbreaking Laugh-In TV show that the Smithsonian Magazine confirmed once it premiered on NBC quickly became a phenomenon. Combining fast-paced one-liners, absurd sketches, non-sequiturs, musical performances, and celebrity appearances, the show paved the way for television sketch comedies, including Saturday Night Live. Producer Lorne Michaels was in fact a Laugh-In writer. It also launched the careers of numerous actors, especially women, including Goldie Hawn, Lily Tomlin, and Ruth Buzzy. It introduced catchphrases like "Sock it to me," "Very interesting," and "Look that up in your funkin' wagnalls." The memorable set design, the mainstay of the show, was a summer of love-style joke wall painted with brightly colored psychedelic designs and flowers. Actors swung open doors to deliver their quips and one-liners, most of them barely able to control their laughs. But it was the faux news segments and comedy sketches involving bumbling judges and police officers that with a wink and a nod challenged traditional forms of authority. Providing context on just how much of a standout in the crowded field of weekly television entertainment this revolutionary new show was, the Los Angeles Times mused that once upon a time in TV land, a sketch comedy show swept through primetime like a comic cyclone. Nothing on TV at the time resembled Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In when the hour-long series premiered in 1968 on NBC, and nothing has really looked like it since it left the air in 1973. Although Saturday Night Live, Mad TV, and other sketch shows have captured some of the flavor of Laugh-In, no other comedy show has matched it in terms of its hyper-speed outrageousness and offbeat sensibility. The risque humor of Laugh-In often pushed the envelope. Its approach to comedic riffs on topical issues helped pave the way for acclaimed series like All in the Family and Maude, and thanks to its relentless pace, even Matt Groening, creator of The Simpsons, cites it as an influence. While the New York Times spotlighted the important fact that the program began in the fertile mind of George Schlatter, who joins us today to talk all about his comedic invention and broader legacy as captured in his new memoir, Still Laughing, A Life in Comedy. George, welcome to the show. Did you grow up seeking to make people laugh through storytelling?
My mom was a concert violinist, and she was a Christian Scientist. Now combine those two, right? and she loved to laugh, and I loved to make her laugh. And my first experience was I was in a giant in Jack and a Beanstalk, and I had to sit at the top of the ladder and wait for Jack, and I was carrying a chicken. And coming down the ladder, I had the chicken, right? And on the way down the ladder, the chicken soiled my green tunic, and which is a mess. And I heard the audience laugh, and I thought, boy, that sounds pretty good. And from there on, so you might say my early career was covered with chicken guano.
From getting that reaction, do you instinctively remember feeling at home on stage, telling the joke, so to speak, making the joke more behind the scenes writing them?
No, I think it was because I couldn't do anything else. I believe that's what it was. My mother generated a lot of interest in me in doing music and so forth. And then it just seemed to gravitate to when I heard that first laugh, it sounded good. I've been trying to get another one ever since.
Now, for viewers who might not know, and as you vividly recall in your memoir, prior to comedy, your first foray after attending Pepperdine University in California into the entertainment world was actually via the record business, managing talent, before moving to the more familiar managerial lane of booking acts for Ciro's Comedy Club on the Sunset Strip. How, reflecting back, do you feel like those early training grounds for spotting new talent and managing veteran stars came into balance for you as you then began your transition to working and then producing your first television shows?
I came to California to go with the road show of Desert Song, and I got a throat infection and couldn't go. So then I had to find a regular job. So I went to MCA and applied for a job in the mailroom, which I got, and that led to where I am today through a series of funny misadventures, handling talent. And then from there, I met Dinah Shore, and I started talking to Dinah, booking guest stars for the Dinah Shore Show. And she loved to laugh, and I made her laugh. And eventually, as a result, I wound up producing the Dinah Shore Show, which was my first big break. Until then, it was just kind of spotty. My first big break was with Dinah, because Dinah loved to laugh, and I could make her laugh. And as a result, I became the producer of the Dinah Shore Show. Up until then, I'd worked in Vegas at the Frontier Hotel booking acts, and I'd worked at Ciro's booking acts. I was the last one hired on the show as a producer. But then Dinah was a delightful experience. They make interesting reading and watching on television because they were colorful people, and so some of them were super bright. And I only knew organized then, and they had their own honor and they had their own communication. Now we don't have gangsters; we have politicians.
How do you personally define what is funny? From the individual to the environment you place him in. On a comedy stage, it's primarily the comedian, but in the TV world, there's so many more considerations, from the sets on stage to the material you write. And we're sure a myriad of nuances in between to ultimately pay off with the big laughs.
The most seductive sound in the world is to hear an audience laugh at something you think is funny. And the worst sound in the world is silence when you think something is funny. But that's why it's easier to be a singer. Singer need to get applause every 3 minutes. Comic needs to get a laugh every 15, 20 seconds, or they're dying. Singers do a show that didn't go well, but a comic can die. That's a bad, bad feeling. So it's a very rewarding experience when you hear that laugh. I think your surroundings develop it, and I think the sound is a very seductive sound. When you hear somebody laugh, that makes you feel good. It makes them feel good. And as a result, it becomes a major part of our environment today. And everybody tells jokes. Everybody thinks they're funny. It's a very warm, wonderful, good feeling. And everybody thinks they're funny, and few people really are.
Well, you sure had a gift for picking them. And you'd go on through the 1960s leading up to the creation of Laugh-In to hone your gifts as a television producer and curator of comedy casting, producing a number of hit TV specials that really became events, including Victor Borge's 20th anniversary special, The Judy Garland Show, and The Fabulous Funnies, among other highlights. How did you initially seek to make your comedy programming stand out from the crowd?
It was a fun period. And at that point, television was pretty much the same. There were 18 variety shows on the air one year. And every one of those shows was pretty much the same. The host, the solo, a duet, a commercial, another duet. You can't put Mickey Cohen and Dean Martin in the same paragraph, you know? They were both funny, but differently, right? Mickey Cohen was not really that funny, by the way. He was very quiet, which you wouldn't expect, you know, and it was a different time then. Vegas was different, not like it was today. There were like 6 major hotels there, and each one run by people from a different city. And they controlled everything, and they were not to be fooled with. And all the stories you hear did not happen to one person. All the stories you heard were spread out over a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of hotels. Mickey Cohen was just one of them. The Frontier Hotel was owned by Jake Kozlov. And those were people, those were people not to be fooled with. Vegas was much different then. But it was an adventure. Even then, those people were, in their own way, they were funny. And even Vegas today is kind of impersonal. It's this mass of people and machines and whatever. Then, in between shows, Dean Martin used to go out into the casino and deal. And he would deal cards, and he'd say, 18, hit it. 24, that's a winner. Winner 21. He would pay off on any hand. And they went crazy. They said, but look at the money he's giving away. And you see the crowd outside waiting to get in here? And that was an adventure. You can't do that anymore. They passed all kinds of laws against that. But Vegas was run by some very colorful people. And you got to know them. And you hope you didn't get to know them too well. But it's much different now. It's much more corporate and dignified and legitimate and honest and legal.
So filming in front of a live crowd is a very different sort of pressure from doing it taped, where the laugh tracks are added in, or they could shoot multiple takes with laughter in the background and decide among them which is best to use. You had to guarantee that you had 3 audiences laughing all as hard at the same time, with the audience at home, the one watching live in the studio, and of course among the comedians, comedy actors, and guest stars once you cast comedians Dan Rowan and Dick Martin as hosts of the now legendary and at the time groundbreaking sketch show Laugh-In by the later 1960s. What was your initial big bang moment of inspiration that such a cutting edge concept could work when you first pitched it to NBC?
And I came along because NBC had nothing to put on Monday night at 8 o'clock, opposite Lucy and Gunsmoke. And so they needed a show. And I had seen all of these young character people. And I said I could put them all together into one show. Nobody knew anybody on the show. They were all unknown, but funny, delightful people. And put them all together. And then we played. We taped a ton of material. And we taped it. And then we stopped people in the hall. We didn't have enough money to get guest stars. So we would stop people in the hall. And I got John Wayne. I said, Mr. Wayne, he said, I'm not going to do that show. Those people are crazy. Yes, thank you, Mr. Wayne. We put that on the air. So we put the first couple of years of Laughing was all cameo people who I didn't have to pay anything to, who I stopped in the hall. And it was a freedom. There was a freedom at that point because of the desperation of NBC to have anything to put on opposite Lucy and Gunsmoke. Until then, I'd done special with Danny Thomas, again, because of my experience in Las Vegas, and all of that kind of variety comedy television, which was all the same. And I wanted to do something different. It was also something I could do for no money. That was a big key to my success, being able to deliver shows for nothing.
You are correct when you say there was nothing else like it on the air at the time. With the LA Times bringing into fuller focus the indisputable fact that nothing on TV resembled Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In when the hour-long series premiered in 1968 on NBC. No other comedy show had matched it in terms of its hyper-speed outrageousness and offbeat sensibility. Creator and producer George Schlatter cast actress, comedian, playwright Lily Tomlin, Goldie Hawn, Ruth Buzzy, Henry Gibson, Artie Johnson, Joanne Worley, Judy Carney, Alan Suze, and Gary Owens. The cast was huge and culturally diverse, and many of them, including Gibson, who offered little poems, loud voice Worley, or Sakatumi girl Karn, became audience favorites. The series attracted top guest stars including John Wayne, Debbie Reynolds, Sonny and Cher, Kirk Douglas, Diana Ross, and Jack Lemmon. Announcer Owens would introduce the proceedings with a hand cupped over his ear. A long-haired, high-voiced crooner named Tiny Tim strummed ukulele and crooned "Tiptoe Through with Tulips with Me." Please talk about what has to be the powerful experience of watching this concept you had explode with laughter and success over those first couple years as it swept through primetime TV land like a comic cyclone.
So this thing came along, and it cost nothing, and we got it ready real quick. And there was all of these unknown, young, gorgeous character people. You know, you see Goldie Hawn, you immediately say, this woman is going to do something. And she did. She walked into the studio, and it was pure magic, as was Joanne and Ruth and Artie Johnson and all of those people. And a lot of luck was involved and desperation, because when you have a 0 rating in a time period, they'll try anything. And they did. So they gave me a commitment to do like 3 shows. And then when the show got on the air and it hit, then it just exploded, and we did anything. It was a great, great experience. Sketch comedy was not new. Sketch comedy existed. What didn't exist was the brief staccato kind of, punchline comedy. Until Laugh-In, everything was a long monologue and explanation and sketches and so forth. Laugh-In came on and things lasted 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. So if you blinked, you missed something. So your parents or grandparents were glued to the set waiting for something to happen, and it usually did. It was a delightful period of time when the industry was offering nothing other than 18 hours, 18 shows of all the same kind of show, variety show. And so this came along, and it happened. It just exploded. And it was a delightful experience. I mean, how many times in a life are you going to find Lily Tomlin and Goldie Hawn and Ruth Buzzy and Artie Johnson, And when it happened so fast, the network really didn't know what was going on. They went, what the hell? This isn't a television. I said, yes, it is. They said, but this doesn't make sense. I said, right. That's the reason to do it. And I was very, very lucky. The timing was lucky. And then I married Jolene Brand, which that even more lucky because she was doing the Ernie Kovacs show. And Ernie had a big effect on me. And there's a tremendous amount of luck and desperation. And failure, by the way, is a very exciting experience, because when you fail, when you fall that far, getting up is a delightful experience. But the other people that we got to come on Laugh-In, and Lena Horne, for instance, to have Lena doing jokes. And it was a success born out of a vacuum. Where there was nothing much happening. And when you have that situation and you come in with something that's totally off the wall.
Longtime fan of the Los Angeles Times and their cover story on your career in comedy shine on one of Laugh-In's most revolutionary contributions to changing television forever, specifically within mixing a psychedelic vibe with a torrent of silly one-liners, double entendres, and pointed social and political commentary. Laugh-In was so influential and had such a grip on pop culture that some industry observers have credited the show with giving presidential candidate Richard Nixon a major boost when he appeared in a brief cameo and awkwardly uttered "Sakatumi." with the Smithsonian doubling down that while today it's hard to imagine a time in which comedy and presidential politics were separate spheres, 1968 marked a turning point in television and political history. Though George Schlatter took heat from friends for aiding Nixon's campaign, how did you manage to lure a presidential candidate whose whole image was on being Mr. Serious onto your stage? Especially after how poorly performed and that awful 1963 debate with JFK.
Probably the most famous one was when we talked Richard Nixon into being on Laugh-In at a time when no president had been funny, and he came on and said, "Sock it to me," and the audience exploded. They'd never seen anything like that, and he was very boring, but his "sock it to me," and he said, "Good idea," and he went on the air, and the next day people were saying, look at this show, look at this show. That helped a lot. But laughter is a major part of our necessity list of things that must have it. You must laugh. We have to laugh. Children have to laugh. And
pulling the curtain back a little farther, would you give viewers a peek at what the pressure's like amid all of the fun and laughter on stage, off behind the scenes, with the network executives breathing down your throat, and a live TV audience to manage along with the rest of the set and crew, advertisers and talent booking? It sounds like there's a million balls in the air at once to keep a hit show successful.
The fear of failure is a great motivating device, and the sound of laughter is a great reward. And when there's nothing was happening on NBC. They had no ratings. It was Monday night at 8:00. Lucy and Gunsmoke were the top 1 and 2 shows. So they bought this show because they had nothing else to put on in there. And we came in with this karate. I mean, Goldie and Lily. You want to find Lily Tomlin? Came into my office, and we sat there for like 2 hours, and she did all of these characters. And she said, "Which one do you want to do?" I said, "I want to do them all." And when Lily Tomlin did the Ernestine, the telephone operator, the first night, and we told her, by the way, dial with this finger. That was the secret there. She dialed with that finger. So she made a phone call to William Buckley and went on the air. Ernestine, this Mr. Buckley, right? And that we taped that thing. It went on the air. And the next day, people were stopping her in the hall saying, "Oh, you're the new girl," and laughing. So there was a lot of luck involved and the ability to listen to somebody and say, "Wait a minute, that's funny." And then technically, the ability, which had just been developed, to edit all of those things into these brief staccato kind of blackouts, and then the unpredictability of it, and then the network, because they were desperate for a show for Monday night at 8, would okay anything because the show cost nothing.
To further amplify your pioneering work as a TV producer, you were additionally responsible for starting one of the first independent TV post-production editing studios in Hollywood, the Editing Company, which became a powerhouse in the industry. Was this first developed out of creative necessity?
What was difficult was to do the kind of comedy I wanted to do, which was bright, staccato, rim shots. There was no editing facility or technique yet developed. So we started that. And we developed a company that could do all of these flash cuts, all of these brief cutaways and sound effects and all of that. But there wasn't a facility that was yet developed to do that. So much of the editing techniques that you now see were developed there in Beverly Hills at our editing company. And we had some great editors, and they did wonderful, wonderful things. We did one show. I sold a show. Now, you got to understand, at this point, I was hot. I mean, I was big time. And so they wanted to do something else. So I said, all right, I've got an idea to do a show made up of all of these little fast cuts and sound effects and no host. And it's just a barrage. And they said, yeah. Now, Laugh-In was big, so I could have sold them anything, right? So we do this show, and it was called Turn On. And it was a visual and sound effects experience where you just sat there and absorbed it. Nothing really connected to anything else, but it was just this like a barrage of jokes and funny people and funny sight gags. And NBC looked at it. They bought 13 shows, and they upped the order to 18 shows because they were that good, and they were thrilled with this show. However, there was a guy in Cleveland who was upset that they'd canceled Peyton Place to put Turn On, and he called all of the affiliates and said, we can't allow this to happen. So he called all of the affiliates. So as the show reared from California to the coast, it was being canceled one station at a time. By the time it went from California to New York, it had been from New York to California, it had been canceled. And so it's the shortest series in the history of television was Turn On, one of the most brilliant pieces of editing, and preceded all of the things we now do on videotape. But it was one of my favorite experiences, the biggest disaster in my career or on television. turn-on still ranks as the fastest cancellation in the history of television. Now, is that something to be proud of? Yes. And I would do it today, but unfortunately, to collect any of the money, NBC made me give them back all the tapes because they thought if this show ever gets on the air, it will be a big hit. So it doesn't exist. But I remember that as one of my most fulfilling experiences.
As your clout as a top TV producer continued to ascend to higher and higher rating heights, the New York Times credited your zany collage of televised comedy that captured the tumultuousness of the 1960s, combining a breakneck visual style, commentary on politics and society, and plain old slapstick to become the highest rated series of the late 1960s. It melded the polished nightclub humor of Dan Rowan and Dick Martin, the hosts, with a vibrant new generation of unconventional comics and actors, most of them playing several roles. Not until Saturday Night Live would another television variety show leave such an impact on the evolution of American comedy. The Museum of Broadcast Communication is added in their appraisal of the series. And so it feels fitting as you took your place among the stars of TV comedy creation that you'd be tapped to create and produce the first live televised comedy award show with the annual American Comedy Awards, which ran for 15 years. When did you first come up with this idea?
The experience of laughter is a very heartwarming, wonderful, almost orgasmic experience when you hear that big laugh. And then desperation has a lot to do with it because the fear of failure is what makes a lot of people funny. But when you saw variety in the old days, it was just a singer and a guest star and they'd talk and do a duet. We came in with this barrage of things that were 5 seconds, 10, 20 seconds, and the network had 3 censors assigned just to me. And the censors would come and say, you can't say that. And I said, okay, we'd already said it. By the time they told me I couldn't do it, it was already on the air. So a sense of danger, a fear of danger, and an appreciation of the experience. I mean, some of my shows that didn't do well were as rewarding as anything. The Comedy Awards, there have been award shows celebrating actors and actresses and singers and dancers and producers and directors, and they have a comic introduce the show, but then they'd get lost. I said, let's just do the comics. And so all of those things were people who were funny. And we came on with the Comedy Awards. They'd never done an award show celebrating the people who were celebrating everybody else. And that show just came on and we were doing, Robin Williams, the first time Robin Williams came on television, people were stunned. They didn't know what the hell that was. Wonderful, wonderful. Flip Wilson, another one. Those people were so unique that there was no place for them. And as a result, when you found a place for them, that's what made it popular.
Turning to another legendary TV institution that ran for decades, including my generation as a child of the 1980s watching them every year, you helped co-create and curate another cultural phenomenon with the wildly entertaining Jerry Lewis MDA Labor Day telethons that ran live for nearly 24 hours every year, raising over $2.5 billion over its lifetime run and helping millions of children stricken with muscular dystrophy. You and Jerry kicked off this little experiment together in 1966, and it ran for over 45 years. Going back in time to the genesis of this television sensation, did you go into it with the same producer headspace you would of something like Laugh-In? Figuring the more entertained viewers were, the longer they'd watch and the more they'd donate? What a juggling act that must have been.
First of all, there was a really viable cause for the telethons. And secondly, you had all the time to do anything you wanted to do so you could experiment in them. And Jerry Lewis was an enormously talented young man. And we think about Martin and Lewis when they worked the Copa and everything. They worked the Copa, which was a tough place in New York, owned by Jules Podell. And people would make reservations. And as people kept arriving, they kept moving more and more tables ringside to where Martin and Lewis eventually had to work in the band, up in the drummers and everything. Well, that situation itself lends itself to a comedy experience. And Jerry was great, but then what he didn't know was that Dean was funnier. Dean was always waiting, right? And he emerged. His voice was great. There was a laugh in his voice. It was very appealing, and he was great looking. And Jerry was so crazy. And here came Dean, everybody, and he was just charming and warm and very, very funny, Dean. So, but at that point, the idea of doing a telethon where you could do all night long and do anything, it was a very seductive situation into which a lot of my people found great arena for celebration. And we've got to go back to the time when there were bright colors and bright people and funny things and a happy experience. the level of taste and acceptability on television today kind of concerns me a little. You don't need to use that language. You don't need to talk about the subject matter. The relationship between men and women, relationship between men and women. Those are funny incidents out of reality. They're funny. And then when you put them on with a little smile, it's a very seductive form that we need to see more of.
USA Today, upon reporting the news that you and Jerry were winding down the telethons due to his deterioration of his health, regaled readers with a few select highlights from the show's decades-long run, beginning with a reminder that for years Labor Day wasn't just a day off from work. It meant that it was time to watch the annual Muscular Dystrophy Association telethon. It was time to watch Jerry Lewis in action. Now it's truly the end of an era. The thing is, the MDA telethon was more than just a fundraiser. It was a star-studded parade of singers and entertainers. Weekend-long Labor Day telethon in 1966, usually kicking off Sunday night and running into Monday afternoon. Celebrities included Frank Sinatra, John Lennon, Michael Jackson, Pitbull, Robin Williams, Carrie Underwood, and Jennifer Lopez, to name just a few, who carved out time in their schedules to appear. And it was thrilling to watch the numbers on the tote board ring up like a slot machine jackpot as money poured in for the cause so near and dear to Lewis's heart. It became a personal endurance test for Lewis, who never said why he was so involved. He usually ended the event by singing You'll Never Walk Alone. What do you count looking back as a couple of the most nerve-wracking nights behind the scenes, whether in terms of the money goal Jerry had set to raise, or some technical issues, or a star cancellation and having to fill it last minute in real time?
It was. I did one when I was going to do the Jerry Lewis telethon, and I didn't really want to do it. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And I said, okay. So Jerry came in, and our first meeting is supposed to be at, Jerry was a control freak. So our first meeting is supposed to be at noon. So I'm waiting, and so he arrives, and I told him, I said, we're going to go to your dressing room. And the dressing room was a closet, and that turned him off, right? And then eventually when we got to the room, nothing was right, and nothing was what he expected at all. And Jerry's reaction to being confronted with total confusion and pandemonium made even Jerry funnier. Accident. We've got to introduce more accident. And I don't mean just politically now, which is their own form of comedy, but people having fun, people laughing, people doing crazy things. We need to see more of that because we need the release of laughter.
Among the many personalities from across the entertainment spectrum that you knew and worked with throughout your career, like Jerry Lewis, another dear friend of yours was the one and only Frank Sinatra. So much so that you produced and directed Frank, Liza, and Sammy, the ultimate event in 1989, along with giving the eulogy at Frank Sinatra's funeral. Please talk about that special relationship.
Reluctantly. My first meeting with Frank Sinatra, I was very young, and I was at MCA, and he came to sign his contract, which he signed his contract, and he never paid commission, but MCA made so much money by representing Frank Sinatra. So I was like 18 years old in the mailroom, and Frank Sinatra came in with the contracts, and all the agents were there, and he signed the contract, and he said, is this okay? And handed it to me. I'm 18. I said, yeah. He said, he signed the contract, and he looked at me, and he said, I have ties older than this guy. So I went, okay. But anyhow, from there, we had a chance to work with Sinatra over a period of years, many different episodes. He signed to do a commercial, and they wanted me to do it. I said, I don't know, please. I know what's going to happen. It's not good. I don't want to do it. So they said, please, you have to do this. He's getting a big number. I said, all right. So I read this thing, and I said, he's never going to do this. They said, well, he's getting a huge number, and it's going to take 4 days to shoot the commercial. I said, I read it, and I said, I think we're talking about 45 minutes. What? I said, he's never going to do this. So I said, I'll shoot the commercial. I'll put a stand in for Sinatra. And when you get that just perfect, the way you want Frank to do it, then I'll talk him into doing it. So talked to Frank, and he arrived, not necessarily real happy to do this commercial, but he was getting a large number. And so I laid it all out. So we would do commercial, then stills, then another spot, then commercial. So we moved around the studio, one location after another, doing bits and pieces. And it was fine. He'd do that and then do some stills and do commercial. And finally, I had one more shot to go. I said, okay, one more shot. He said, that's it. I said, no, Frank. He said, no, listen, crazy. That's it. I'm through. I said, no, Frank. I need the whole thing. I need this one more shot. He said, well, you do it. I said, no, Frank. You have to. Well, you're getting a big, I need this one more shot. He said, no. So I don't know why I said this. I said, don't make me hurt you. And he looked at me like, are you crazy? I said, if I get the one spot, I'm going to have to hurt you. okay, well, let's do this right away. I don't get hurt. So anyhow, he did the spot, and it took exactly 40 minutes, and he got like a huge number to do this commercial. And I'm soaking wet now because I mean there was a lot of a lot of pressure. All Frank and Jillian, everybody standing around. So anyhow, they had the commercial and they won awards, and so now they wanted him to do another one. I said, "Oh, please." Doing commercials with Frank Sinatra was an adventure, but I loved him. He was he was such a major event. He was not just a performer, a singer, or whatever. He was an event. He had a force field of energy and fun and comedy too. Funny. You make him laugh, you can get by with anything, and I did, including doing the commercial being introduced by a bishop. Can you imagine that? Until Barbara Sinatra called me and wanted me to do a eulogy at his funeral. And I said, Barbara, I don't want to do that. This is just, she said, yeah. I said, all right, as long as I don't have to follow Gregory Peck. And sure enough, Gregory Peck, and now here's George Schlatter. And I went to do a eulogy to Frank Sinatra in a cathedral, right? And I was introduced by the bishop. And I said, thank you, Your Honor, which got a big laugh at Sinatra's funeral because I'd talked to a lot more judges than bishops. And everybody laughed. And that lightened the whole thing up to where it became a funny episode. A lot of Frank Sinatra's entourage and his surrounding and his friends and coworkers were comedy junkies. And if you could make Frank, you could say almost anything. But you better be careful.
Out of curiosity, how did you acquire the nickname Crazy from Frank?
It had to do with anytime they wanted Frank to do anything, they would come to me to talk him into it. Jolene says, George, go ahead. I said, but he's pushing my car. And Barbara says, Jolene said to me, look, George, we're at the corner of Wilshire and Beverly, 3:00 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning. There's two guys who've been drinking a lot, and you're playing bumper tag with two Rolls Royces. Somebody's going to get arrested. Do you think it's going to be you or Frank? So I said, okay. So we drove, and Barbara Sinatra pushed my car all the way to the house. And laugh. I thought he was going to collapse. He was laughing so hard. He loved to laugh. You could make him laugh. You could do almost anything, but you better be careful. Don't take any chances.
You were something of a forerunner in reality television too, with Speak Up America and then Real People. When did you first feel like this concept would be a winning one with audiences?
Speak Up America was another adventure. It was born of the fact that the television was consumed by important people discussing important events, but there were a whole bunch of unimportant people talking about even more important events because they affected the little people. So Speak Up America gave a voice to people, and we started out with just people on the street, but eventually we went to everybody, and everybody wanted to do Speak Up America because it gave a voice to people who did not have access to you and to other television people. So I'm proud to Speak Up America. And Real People was a whole show devoted to people you'd never heard of. And so that was another adventure that went on the air for many, many years. And I looked last night at the thing about the 80s and reality television. Well, Real People and Speak Up America and, all of those shows we did were the first time that little people you'd never heard of, became important. And that was rewarding. And some of those people were very, very funny. And some of them were just heroic. But we did the Navajo Code Talkers, who had never been recognized. We did the first piece on the Tuskegee Airmen that had never been acknowledged. So a lot of the stuff we did on those shows brought fame and notoriety to people that had never been noticed before. So that was rewarding. Those shows were not real funny. They were just heroic. They were emotional. And the audience would just rise up and cheer for the Navajo Code Talkers, who was the language that was used in the South Pacific because the Japanese could never understand the Navajo language. And that helped win the war. And they went on and they made an agreement where they weren't supposed to tell anybody in case the government wanted to use the language later. So they went many years unrecognized. And then finally, when we did a tribute to them, they received the recognition and notoriety that they deserved. So there was a lot of that stuff. Accident, again, my own brief attention span contributed a lot to funny, yes, but also to some of the heroic events that we did.
You became known in the 1990s for producing these fantastically lavish televised birthday celebrations and celebrity audience presence, tributes on stage from top talent, and audiences glued to their TVs and living rooms around the world watching. Please talk in that spirit about producing Sammy Davis Jr.'s 60th anniversary celebration and Muhammad Ali's 50th birthday celebration as two storied examples.
My daughter Maria helped a lot because she grew up in this environment of take a chance, do anything, right? Put together. And the collection of the people that were there to salute Sinatra was an awesome collection of people, and delightful and warm and funny and frank. It was just great. And then we also did Sammy Davis's 75th. And Sammy, I wanted to sell a special with Sammy, and I sold an hour show. And I went to Sammy, and his doctor called and said, Sammy can't do the show. He's having throat infection. He's having chemotherapy. So I said, Sam, I've sold this show. You got to do this. And I said, now I'm going to do the show, and you're going to be there. And don't make me make an announcement. Sammy could barely talk. He said, I'll be there. So we started booking, and now everybody wanted to do the show. I mean, everybody, people, and Gregory Peck and Shirley MacLaine are standing over at the side. And Gregory Peck says, Shirley, we must be careful not to be the first white people to fuck up. And so it was, everybody came on that show. And that was one of my things that I'm most proud of. Maria edited that show, and it was an impossible collection of major stars all wanting to be there for Sammy Davis. So we've had a few of those adventures that I don't think will ever be duplicated, because one, nobody's going to take that kind of chance, and two, it would be impossible to collect that many stars in one place at one time, But there's been a lot of luck involved in my and some serious successes and some really serious failures. But I've enjoyed all of it. Ali and I, and Lonnie, Ali, his wife, was very, very helpful. And they asked Muhammad. They said, "Well, you just came back from Europe, and you're not politically. Why are you doing this show for George Bush?" And he said, "I'm not doing it for George Bush. I'm doing it for George Schlatter." Well, I thought, oh boy, Muhammad, you got me in trouble now. But he did it, and he was another delight. And that was a great thing, because we had this huge thing with everybody celebrating George Bush, and he came out to say thank you, and it was so timed. And then he said thank you, and the fireworks went off, right? And it was going to be great. Well, he did that too early, and the fireworks then went off in the middle of his speech. So while he's doing his thank yous, the air is full of all of these fireworks. I thought, boy, oh boy, George, I hope you're better president than you are MC. But even that was an adventure.
What are any other highlight moments beyond the entertaining ones you've touched on already that helped introduce new stars to the world that hadn't been given screen time before?
I did Roseanne's first show, and she was she had just done this domestic goddess thing, right? And I saw her, and I put her on, and then she started doing guest shots all over, and she became a huge star. Taking a chance was part of the reason for my success and my failures. But you don't really do anything that you can be proud of later if you don't take some chances. I took a lot of chances, and fortunately, some of them paid off.
Now, you must have been telling stories from the heydays of Laugh-In and all of these other fantastic shows and specials for years now. Hearing the common refrain, you should write a book about all of this. When did you decide you were ready to sit down and do so for real?
If you get a chance to read the book, you'll see some of the experiences that I shared, where I just sat in a room and started telling stories about my past, and it wound up in a big, thick book. I can't wait until people could read the book. They did a joke. They said, I just finished my first book. Next year, I'm going to read another one. But this is a collection of all of these episodes that were unbelievable as a career. But as little episodes, they come out to funny chapters. So, and we gave that to John Max, who's one of the top comedy writers. I said, John, can you extract everything in here that's not funny? And he put together this collection. And then Martha Bose typed all of these. When the book is just a series of episodes, and it's a little like talking to me, doesn't make too much sense. But when you turn the page, you see something else that doesn't make any sense. But eventually you laugh. And anybody who has the time to wade through a barrage of funny anecdotes, funny accidents, it's all in this book. Still laughing. I didn't really mean to write it. I just dictated all my memories. And Martha Bose, everybody just typed up these memories and put that in this book. It may only sell 2 copies, both of them to me, but it's a funny experience. I didn't know anybody was going to read this book. I said, next year I'm going to read another one, right? But I didn't know anybody would read it. But people are reading it and reliving a time in our life and in our joy where accident was celebrated and mistakes were repeated. And to realize that I put together this whole thing is called Still Laughing, and to put together this whole recollection of anecdotes and accidents and adventures, it's been very rewarding, and could not have done it if I were not married to Jolene, and if not Maria was putting together a lot of the editing. So it's been a long and a bumpy bumpy ride, but boy, I've had a good time.
At 95 years old, did Still Laughing, A Life in Comedy just leap out to you as the obvious title?
Still Laughing, which I think was an interesting title, but the reaction to that is rewarding because people really today want to laugh. They want to have something makes them feel good, makes them feel happy, and laughter is the second best feeling in the world. And we won't go into what's my first.
What new productions have you been involved in lately you can tell us about, now 7 decades into your historic run as a producer?
The beautiful thing about this thing they're doing in Jamestown, it's an entire area, 32,000 square feet or something, devoted entirely to celebrating people who've made us laugh. And that's why I'm so involved in that event. And it's going to be something because it's all comedians. The whole area is with all of these. I mean, Flip Wilson and Robin Williams and all of the comics are celebrated there. And Joan Rivers gave them her collection, which will fill a warehouse. And so I think it's going to be very successful for people to go there.
Let's take viewers who haven't visited yet to 7030 Hollywood Boulevard. It must have felt quite gratifying to be awarded your own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It seems like the ultimate bucket list item for any industry veteran.
It's quite an experience. First of all, I didn't know whether or not I had to have a star, and that seemed to me to be a bigger honor that I was yet worthy of. But then everybody showed up. Dinah and Doris Day and all of these people showed up for the star ceremony, and it's a major thing, to realize that all your friends are going to be able to walk up and down on your star is a worthwhile accomplishment. But it was very, very rewarding to have that kind of recognition,
You were honored with yet another of Hollywood's highest distinctions when you received your honorary Oscar at the Academy Awards. So that must have been a proud moment of acknowledgement of your one-of-a-kind career. What do you say in the way of advice to those who over the years have sought it out on how to blaze their own trail as original as yours?
To be acknowledged by people whose respect I, seek, was rewarding, because my career, if you read the book, you'll see, is not the normal, I was born and I did and I haven't. This is a series of accidents, series of mistakes, and a series of adventures.
Finally, when you look back on your decades in the business of comedy and mastering the art of giving people a laugh when they really needed one, what's brought you the greatest joy from creating it in so many of our daily lives? Whether with Laugh-In or something like the Jerry Lewis telethons you produced for so many years.
The best experience you can have, you must laugh. When a baby's born, you don't have to teach it how to eat, sleep, cry, and laugh. But the brightest children are the ones that laugh. You don't know what they're laughing at, same as now. But it's a wonderful experience, physical and emotional and almost spiritual. The sound of that laughter is very, very seductive.
George Schlatter, it's been an honor speaking today to such a pioneer in comedy television. Thank you so much for taking out time to be on About the Authors TV.
I'm very impressed, and I'm delighted we had this chat.